talk about your bus trip where you were drawing art and you were writing, and you realized that you were a writer because you were happy when I think.
Repeat that
and
question,
then,
would you?
okay. And then the animal part of writing too.
Oh, the animal part of writing. I was telling Jay that you have to be an animal when you're a writer, and I think what I mean by that is that you have to, your hunger for it has to be so intense that it's all-encompassing. But the hunger is not just to write; it's to learn to be a better writer. I mean, your hunger is to know how to write, but the hunger is so all-encompassing. I mean, when I was first starting out, it's hard to explain how intense it is. It just takes over your life. It's really everything in the world to you. And so I always say when, if you want to be a writer, you have to be an animal And in terms of the bus trip, I've taken many Greyhound bus trips, by the way, not just that one, but before I didn't know what I wanted to do after college, and I could draw, pretty well. I wasn't like a great artist or something, but I could draw and then I could write, and I didn't really know what to write about. And at the time there were very few Asian American writers, and so in a sense I felt that it wasn't possible. And my parents and other relatives told me, in fact, if you write about Japanese Americans, you will never get published. And so I felt that I couldn't really write about Japanese Americans, which is all I knew about, because then I would never get published. So I had this animalistic fervor to be a writer, but I couldn't write about Japanese Americans, which was all I knew about. And so it was really difficult to know what to do. And what I did was I actually was walking down Larchmont Boulevard. I don't know if any of you know where that is, but and a car jumped over the curb and hit me. And the guy had a little bit of insurance money, and I used that money to take a Greyhound bus trip, and I just traveled around the country, and I met a lot of really different types of people. I met, for instance, an old woman who lived through the Depression, and I remember her saying this was the last trip she was ever going to take because, because she was, basically she was dying, and I had just read The Grapes of Wrath for a class in college, and she was sort of she was who the book was about. And just meeting all these different types of people made me realize that there are so many different types of people, and we're all so different, that I could write about anything. And what my mother used to always tell me when we were little, and of course we had no idea what she was talking about because we were like into Barbies and stuff, but she would say, the more specific, the more universal. And I think what she meant by that was that the more, exactly you write the truth about yourself, the more other people will relate. And I think meeting all these different types of people for some reason, and then plus just traveling and having that sense of being at home, being nowhere, really solidified for me my desire to be a writer. I'm looking at her like she asked me the question, but
Is there somebody up there she can look at in answering a question? Yeah. Go ahead.
I just wondered about what it was like when you won the Newbery Award, and did you know you were in the running for it, or was it a surprise, and how is your life different now?
Well, it was 4:30 in the morning, and I was asleep, and I didn't know I was in the running, and because nobody. There are some people who there are certain books that everybody's talking about every year, and that year I think everybody was talking about a book called Sea of Trolls by Nancy Farmer, who is actually one of the most talented children's book writers, in the business. She's an incredible writer. And So had I thought I was in the running, I definitely would not have been able to sleep, but I was sound asleep, and the phone rang, and I was living with my boyfriend at the time, and he answered the phone, and he likes to argue with these telemarketer type people. And so I could hear him saying, "Who is this?" And and I thought, this could only be my mother, because my mother's the only one who would do something insane like call me at 4:30 in the morning. And so then all of a sudden his tone changed, and it was really polite, and he was like, "Oh, hold on." And so he came and he brought me the phone, and I said, "Hello, hello." And I'd used his phone a million times, and then he's like, "You have to press the talk button." And so I pressed the talk button, and I said, "Hello." And I knew who Susan Faust was. I did know who the chairman of the committee was. It's just in children's books you kind of know, I don't know, who's who a lot. And so she said, "This is Susan Faust," and of course I screamed. And and I later told her, she later heard me telling this story, and I said, "Ah!" And she goes, "Oh, it was much louder than that." So of course, being a new mother and being totally broke, I had no clothes to wear. So I called up my friend Jeanette and I said, "We gotta go to a mall, girl." And so we went to a mall and I bought a suit. And of course, George kept calling hysterically saying we were gonna miss our plane. And we're like, he's such a worrywart. And of course we missed our plane. And, so I got to sleep at about almost 4 in the morning in New York, and the way it's changed my life is that you're just a lot busier than you were before. And the other way it's changed my life is when I adopted Sammy, I basically did it on credit cards, and I was able to pay off my credit card debt. And let's see, how else has it changed my life? It's, another way it's changed my life is actually, for instance, for Kida, I had to call a cancer doctor, and I called a top cancer doctor, and I interviewed him about the differences between leukemia and lymphoma, and he could tell that I knew nothing about the cancer, and he was getting increasingly rude and impatient, but I had to know the answers, and so I just kept asking him the questions anyway. And for the Vietnam book, I also I called a doctor who works at Yale now, and who's a really big deal there, and he had been in the Vietnam War, and he was much more polite, and I think that's a difference too, that people perceive you differently, and so then they actually believe that your book is going to be published, so they're not as, I wouldn't say rude, but they're not as brusque, because they think, oh, this book is actually going to be published. She's not some nut just calling out of nowhere, so.